arm she says she can't move. This ex-cop says he's too depressed to work, but looks pretty lively online.
They keep paying us. They keep downloading money.
Our 2020 gotcha.
Prosecutors are saying that you scam the system.
Are they cashing in on disability by faking it? And scam psychics behind the neon and seedy storefronts. They're telling fortunes and making fortunes off your misery.
Why do people fall for it? I was completely sucked in.
Fortune sellers. Plus, Kobe Bryant, Sharon Osbourne, Oprah. The stars who give handouts.
Nobody needs anything less than $50,000.
And their relatives who take them. Like Oprah's ex-stepmom.
You're a billionaire and this is what you do?
Gimme, gimme. And when the IRS comes calling, who's mooching who?
I felt like a cheap whore.
The audit, he says, ended with a very special return.
She immediately came over, got on top of me, and started tearing my shirt off.
Tonight,
All right, let's get it.
we're catching them on tape and putting on the cuffs. Are you being fleeced by moochers? Here's Elizabeth Vargas and David Muir.
Tonight, you don't need us to tell you this was tax week across America, millions filing their returns, paying what they owe. But this evening, are your tax dollars being spent by others who claim they're hurt? Come on down, as they say on that game show.
Because you are in for a showcase showdown. 2020 is about to confront some of those who say they're in too much pain to work, too depressed to go outside. So why are they showing up on game shows and posting vacation photos on Facebook? See what happens when Cecilia Vega tracks them down.
The Price is Right!
Say you're in the audience of The Price is Right and you hear those three famous words.
Oh, come on now!
You do what the man tells you, fast, like this woman, Kathy Cashwell.
$1,375. Kathy, come on up here.
But a fortune and fabulous prizes wasn't the only thing Cashwell was collecting. True to her name, Cashwell was also raking in $3 grand a month in workers' comp. Claiming an on-the-job shoulder injury left her totally unable to stand, run, reach, or grasp.
Here we go. Good luck.
But there she is, spinning that big, heavy wheel. Not once, but twice. Wow, who knew Drew Carey was a miracle worker? Cashwell is just one of the countless people accused of faking an injury to collect on disability payments. Experts estimate bogus injury claims cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and questionable claims are up 24% from last year. Moochers like Valerie Scroggins, a bus driver who claimed a severe shoulder injury prevented her from getting behind the wheel. But that's her behind the drums. Investigators caught her on camera playing in her punk band. Later, she pleaded guilty to fraud. This airline employee claimed her ankle was so mangled she couldn't stand, squat, or bend. Yet here she is, looking like she's eligible for the NFL draft. Her case was settled after she was busted on tape. The same goes for this guy, who said he hurt his back while working for a major food and beverage company. His physical restrictions? Bending, twisting, turning. Investigators gave him a perfect 10 for cheating. It takes a secret agent of sorts to catch injury imposters in the act.
I always loved James Bond.
You wanted to be a spy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And in this cat and mouse game, nobody does it better than Chicago-based private eye Bob Keane. He's a moocher-busting 007, armed with a minivan packed full of spy gear.
Tricks in the trunk. What you got?
Full camo.
Full camo, just in case.
His targets often try to evade detection, but once caught red-handed by our master of disguise, they often settle their cases. Like this car company worker, Marwan Khoury, who reported severe back and neck injuries, yet was still able to wield a pickaxe. His lawyer says the video does not reveal the extent of his injury, but from here, it looks like we've got a gold digger. Or this steel worker cashing in on a left shoulder injury while playing with power tools.
He's claiming to his employer limited to no use of his left arm.
And to that you say?
Busted. All right, let's get her.
To see the expert in action, Keene takes 2020 out on a case as observers, staking out a supermarket worker whose doctors say should be wheelchair bound. Her boss wants to know how much she's really hurting.
We're here to document how she really moves.
We know our Mark has a doctor's appointment, but today we're the ones doing the checkup. After waiting for more than 2 hours, we spot her, and not a wheelchair in sight. We can't show her face because the case is still active. And speaking of active, the chase is on.
Now the fun starts.
I'm holding on.
We're burning rubber to stay on her tail, following her car as it barrels down I-88, where apparently speed limits are just a suggestion.
5 over the speed limit.
5 or
5.
After pursuing our target for 50 miles, we catch up with her at a doctor's office northwest of Chicago. Remember, her doctors say she should be confined to a wheelchair, but there are still no wheels in sight. Her case is pending in the courts.
What do you think about people like that? That the people who think they can beat the system?
It's those people that are raising the insurance premiums. That's why I do this.
Catching injury scammers the old school way clearly takes a lot of effort. But sometimes you don't even have to leave the office, because who needs a secret agent when the bad guys are blasting their behavior on social media? Remember Kathy Cashwell, the enthusiastic contender on The Price is Right, who claimed to be totally disabled? She posted her vacation pictures online. Here she is flying high, literally ziplining and hang gliding on Facebook. In a statement to 2020, Cashwell said that despite how she looks in those images, she was, quote, hurting the whole time. But she was collecting the whole time, too. And last year, thanks to those damning depictions, she pleaded guilty to fraud.
Fraud is a fancy word for telling a lie. It's stealing with your pencil as opposed to stealing with a gun.
It turns out the Price is Right double dealer isn't the only one to give herself away online, and it may not get any lower than this. Scores of former New York City cops and firefighters indicted for falsely claiming they had PTSD and anxiety as a result of the September 11th terrorist attacks.
I can only express disgust at the actions of the individuals involved in this scheme.
Individuals like Glenn Lieberman, who said he was so crippled by mental illness he couldn't leave his house. But he's looking far from adrift in this Facebook photo released by prosecutors. His lawyer claims the picture was taken before Lieberman became sick. Then there's Louis Hurtado, who allegedly collected almost $500,000 for his depression from a back injury. Investigators found him online running a karate school and teaching black belt. To quote the Karate Kid's Mr. Miyagi,
"No such thing, bad student, only bad teacher."
And authorities say this man, Richard Cosentino, claimed he was too depressed to go outside. That must mean he caught this giant fish in his living room? One of the most brazen defendants, prosecutors say, is former cop Vincent Lamontia. He is accused of cashing in on 9/11 too, allegedly lying about suffering from depression, and then collecting almost $150,000 in disability. Meanwhile, prosecutors say he was living large with stolen money, taking exotic trips to places like Indonesia. And despite claiming he was too ill to work, Lamontia bragged online about the cash he was pulling in at his new job at an energy company.
They keep paying us. They keep downloading money every single week. We're getting emails that say, congratulations, you have money.
Hey, I'm Cecilia Vega from 2020.
We wanted to ask Lamontia about his seemingly remarkable recovery.
And the prosecutors are saying that essentially you're a cop who scammed the system.
I'm not a cop.
You were a cop at one point. Why don't you give me a quick comment and then we'll get out of your hair.
I really can't.
You know, they say that
My hair is long, you're in it.
you claim to be so mentally ill that you couldn't work, and yet you were still working on the side, basically defrauding the system.
I can't hear the phone.
Lamontia and the other defendants in the case all pleaded not guilty, despite the many who have been busted trying to cash in after claiming to be hurt. There are thousands more willing to give this well-worn scheme a shot.
What do you have to do in order to pull this off?
The best way and only way of beating the system is completely staying in your house, not leaving for 3 to 5 years. Because anything you do outside of that, and we're there, we're gonna get it.
So, what's the craziest story you've ever told to get out of work? We're live tweeting throughout tonight's show, so let us know. We promise we won't tell anybody. Use the hashtag ABC2020.
When we come back here tonight, the fortune tellers who see a fortune in your pocket, but you're about to see them caught on tape, the 2020 sting, when we come back.
Next,
I was completely gullible.
he got dealt the fool card, taken in by a fortune teller, mooching off his misery and his mother's life savings.
$950,000. It's my retirement. It's gone.
But 2020's about to trade her crystal ball for handcuffs. Moochers coming up.
Well, get ready for another takedown now, because we all know someone who's lost a job, a home, a loved one, and who makes money off of them? Well, often the fortune tellers, some who say they can look into their crystal ball and see a brighter future for you. But are those psychics really out to make their own money at any cost? 2020 is right there as their own fortunes change. Here's John Quinones.
The first time I went in there, it ran me $40. About a month after, she asked for about $30,000.
How much money did you give her?
$27,000. $950,000.
The amount of money that we're talking about is astronomical.
Bob Nygaard is a former New York cop turned private investigator with a peculiar niche. He's obsessed with helping people who say they've been conned by psychics, a group much larger than anyone wants to admit.
Lawyers, professional athletes, college professors, people call me from all walks of life.
This sounds outlandish. Why do people fall for it?
People are going through a very difficult time in their life, and they're very vulnerable.
I would like to think that being an intelligent human being, that this could have never happened to me, and it did.
Deborah Salfield was in a bad place. She'd lost her job, she'd lost her boyfriend, and was on the verge of just losing it, period.
My heart was pounding out of my chest.
Deborah needed help, but instead of going to a therapist, a minister, or even a yogi, she found herself going here, a storefront office for several psychics in New York City. The psychic she saw was named Sylvia Mitchell, 39-year-old mystic from Mystic, Connecticut.
Charming?
Very charming, very comforting, very pretty, dressed nicely.
Deborah selects from the psychic's menu and ponies up $75.
They tell you that they know that they can help you, but they have to do a deeper reading. Deeper meaning the next amount is $1,000.
They would meet only 3 times, but Mitchell tells Deborah that the root of her problem is that she's too attached to money. The psychic is more than happy to try and break that attachment. As an exercise in trust, the fortune teller wants Deborah to write out a check for $27,000. It's to be held and then returned at a later date, or so she's told.
When she says, give me $27,000, didn't the light go on?
Being in a very vulnerable place, I acquiesced.
You wrote the check.
Made a huge mistake.
She's not the only one to make a mistake.
The psychic industry estimated to bring in about $2 to $3 billion. Billion with a big.
And the PI says that some of those rundown psychic storefronts with the old woman sitting behind dingy curtains are actually cash cows.
They don't look like much from the outside.
The same people that you see that are shabbily dressed sitting in a little storefront are the same people that when I track them and follow them, they're living in $1 million house on the Intercoastal in Florida. And they're driving around in a Maserati or a Lamborghini or a Ferrari.
And that makes Nygaard a busy man. We're following him as he crisscrosses the country working cases in Florida, California, and New York simultaneously. The stories are sensational, the dollar figures staggering. Take the case of actor Brian James, currently starring on Hollywood's Walk of Shame. 2 years ago, Brian was driving by this psychic shop in the Valley. He was searching for answers about a romantic interest and decided to stop in.
I was completely gullible. I was completely sucked in.
Brian is so intrigued by his first encounter with psychic April Lee that he returns again and again. A bond forms. The two share meals and spend holidays together. In fact, Brian is spending all his free time with the psychic and virtually none with his family.
I'm mad at the psychic for how she manipulated my son.
And just how did she do that? Well, listen to what happens over the months that follow. A grooming process begins as Brian is directed to do whatever April Lee demands. She instructs him to collect random items.
Getting pennies, getting a watch, getting dolls and wrapping them up.
Nygaard says the tasks are designed to let a psychic gauge how much control she has over her customer. The next thing Brian hears is that April Lee has reached out to his love interest, and good news, the feelings are mutual.
Pretending to send me text messages from that person, pretending to give me gifts from that person.
But there's a price for love, and the psychic begins asking Brian to foot the bill. When Brian doesn't have it, the psychic allegedly comes up with a scheme to get the money through Brian's mother, Mary. Brian dupes his own mother, telling her the money will be used for acting lessons and a high-powered Hollywood agent.
You could hear the urgency in his voice, like, I need it now, like he was petrified. And I just did it.
And that's how Mary James goes from doting mother to personal ATM.
It started with 10,000, 20,000, 15,000, and then it grew. We're talking 50, or we're talking 100.
Mary is not a wealthy woman. The money she's handing over to Brian, who in turn is handing over to April Lee, is coming from her retirement account. She gives and gives for nearly 2 years until she's drained dry.
$950,000. It's my retirement. It's gone.
According to Brian, the psychic had always maintained his story would have a happy ending. She promised he would end up with the love of his life, be a Hollywood star, and...
She always stressed that everything that I did, that I would be getting the money back.
Nearly 2 years later, none of it has happened. Racked with guilt and shame, he confesses.
He said, I finally need to tell you, all the money went to a psychic. And it's really hard to process it, but it's the truth.
Nygaard says the vulnerable are the easiest victims. Remember Deborah Saulfield and that check for 27 grand?
I had taken out a credit line on my home because I was recently divorced and needed emergency money.
And now she had it.
She did.
She was that good, that convincing.
She's really good.
Saulfield finally breaks free of the psychic's hold and begins to take control of her own future. She races to her bank.
By the time I'd gone to my bank to cancel the check, the funds were already gone.
Mitchell disappears from the city. Now, many would have given up and written off the experience as an expensive lesson, but not Deborah and not Brian. Both hire Bob Nygaard to bring their psychics to justice.
And usually they come to me once they've hit rock bottom.
Next, watch a trap get set.
I want nothing more than my mom to be paid back.
Psychic April Lee and the future she never saw coming. A gotcha in a parking lot. Caught with handcuffs. And caught on tape. Coming up. '2020 continues. Once again, John Quinones.
Like so many people who say they're victims of psychic fraud, Brian James first turned to the police for help. Good luck with that.
They go in and they say, I was ripped off by a fortune teller, a psychic. And the first thing the cop does is roll their eyes and say, you gotta be kidding me.
People even watching this tonight will say, why is it a crime if these people were gullible enough?
The number one answer when people walk into a police station is, it's a civil matter. And they're told, there's the door.
Again, no sympathy from police. And that's when people call Nygaard. His conversation with cops often goes like this.
I say, listen, when this person first came in, you told them it was a civil matter. You know what? I did your job for 21 years, and I know differently. It's a criminal matter.
That's exactly what Nygaard told New York authorities after one of his clients was ripped off by psychic Betty Vlado. Vlado somehow convinced her victim to hand over 50 grand, including $14,000 for this crystal, which she claimed had healing powers. Vlado was convicted of grand larceny, but the shame of getting duped often leaves victims wanting to crawl under a rock.
It's not about psychic ability. It's about simple theft. It's about applying the law to theft.
Bob Nygaard is, in my opinion, an American hero.
Deborah Saulfield hired Bob Nygaard to put the kibosh on Sylvia Mitchell's fortune-telling flim-flam. No small task. Mitchell is long gone from the plush Greenwich Village shop. It takes 7 months, but with the help of an informant, Nygaard tracks her to Connecticut, where Mitchell is arrested. It's Deborah's chance to get all her money back. But then, a stunning twist.
The defense offered to give you your money back.
They did. I turned it down.
You could have had all your $27,000 back and walked away.
That's true.
Why not?
Because there was another victim involved in the case, and I didn't want to let the other victim down by not testifying.
If the psychic walks, Deborah is out thousands of dollars. It's a huge gamble, says Florida State's Attorney Dave Ehrenberg.
These cases are difficult to prove. The jury wonders, how could anyone be fooled by this?
Is there a sense, even among law enforcement, that these victims brought it upon themselves?
It's my experience that jurors will think that way.
But in Deborah's case, the jurors do believe her. Yes, the sad expression on Sylvia Mitchell's face indicates maybe she can see the future.
Guilty.
Convicted of grand larceny, Mitchell is sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison. She must also pay restitution.
There's other victims that have lost far more than I have. And they've lost not only their money, they've lost their jobs, they've lost their integrity, they've lost their self-esteem. That's not easy to get back.
The poster boy for low self-esteem might well be Brian James, who ruined his mother financially with his decision to repeatedly see a psychic. Remember now, she's out nearly $1 million.
I want nothing more than my mom to be paid back.
Nygaard says if Mary James is ever going to see a dime of her money back, the psychic, April Lee, will first need to be arrested. But there's a problem. The LAPD is not interested in taking the case.
Brian went to the LAPD. He walked in, he tried to report the crime, and an officer said to him, "Well, I've got advice for you. Don't ever go see a psychic again."
Always elusive, April Lee is finally tracked down. She's driving in style in a brand new Mercedes. We spot her again in a theme park, waiting to have lunch. Nygaard has Brian reach out to April. The psychic wants an additional $511,000 to continue removing that curse that supposedly swirls around Brian.
These people, they financially exploit somebody under the guise of offering them assistance.
Nygaard still needs help from law enforcement. He finds it at the DA's office in Santa Clara County.
Now, our office considers this crime to be treacherous.
It's time to play Sting the Psychic. The operation will be spearheaded by veteran investigator Dennis Brookins.
My job as a criminal investigator is to help victims. My job is not to turn victims away.
A script is written, the plot is laid out, and the young actor will now have the lead role in this very personal drama. Brian calls April and says he has the money. The transfer of more than $500,000 is supposed to take place inside an escrow office in San Jose.
I came up with a plan that his mother was going to sell a piece of property and obtain the money because of the sale.
But there's a snag.
The defendant said that she had to stay out in the parking lot and she was going to meditate.
Brian improvises. Emerging from the vehicle, he goes into the office alone. Brian says April and her husband, who's driving, think they're moments away from a huge payday.
Once I knew the victim was secure with other investigators inside the building, I instructed the arrest team to come in behind their vehicle, block it so they could not leave.
This video shows the moment April Lee is arrested.
April looked shocked. They had no idea they were going to be arrested. They came to Santa Clara County for one reason and one reason only, and that was greed.
Bail is set at $500,000 each. April's attorney says his client is innocent and calls this a civil matter.
It was just really great to see Brian be able to turn the tables on the con artist.
Bob Nygaard says he's recovered more than $2 million in cash and property for victims of psychic cons. But there's more to be done. he's currently working on 10 new cases. So before you pay for a peek at your future, a word of warning from those still reeling from the recent past.
If anybody is feeling vulnerable, down on their luck, needy, please, please, don't go to a psychic, please.
So have you ever gone to a fortune teller, or do you think you're too savvy to get sucked in? We're still live tweeting, so let us know using the hashtag ABC2020.
And when we come back here tonight, 6 letters you thought you'd never hear together, IRS and SEX. The auditor looking for something else to help with that return when we come back.
Next.
I felt like a cheap whore.
An audit he'll never forget.
We finished removing my clothes, removed her clothes, things happened.
But who mooched with the first move? Coming up. Now, more of Moochers. Here's Chris Connolly.
Riding through the rural Oregon landscape. Looks exhilarating, doesn't it? But up to his handlebars in a big-time brouhaha with the Internal Revenue Service, 40-year-old Vince Burrows is no easy rider, thanks to... Whoa-oh, that summer night.
Honestly, I felt like a cheap whore.
After normal business hours, at 9 p.m. here in Eugene, Oregon, Vince Burrows opened his front door, he says, to Dora Abrahamson. She was an IRS agent. She was auditing him. The two had never met before.
She said she was going to do my paperwork. She came up the stairs, knocked on the door. I opened the door.
What he says happened next, as in immediately.
You had sex.
Mm-hmm.
How would you characterize that sexual encounter?
It was forced upon me.
Trading sex for cheaper taxes?
Well, it would get a lot of people talking.
Burrows says he got several flirtatious text messages.
He was seduced by Dora Abrahamson. She was an IRS agent.
She showed up at his house and said, look, have sex with me.
It would get a lot more of them laughing.
And of course, the guy was stunned. He thought only people making more than $250,000 a year got screwed by the IRS. But no.
And it would leave Vince himself feeling, wait, what?
A stress case. I just feel like I want to cry right now, but I'm trying not to.
Not long ago, Vince says, he was making good money as a local contractor until the economy hit the skids. Vince got behind on his taxes, $20,000 worth, he figured. When the call came from the IRS, he says it was Dora on the line.
She goes, well, wait a minute, I think I know you. I go, okay, how do you know me? She goes, do you race motorcycles?
Funny she should ask. In fact, he had won a few races locally. Vince says she knew who he was, but when she texted him this selfie, Vince didn't recognize her.
Yeah, she goes, well, you're really lucky that I got your audit.
But it's like to hear the word audit from the IRS.
I started shaking immediately. My heart rate went up. I just tried to cooperate with them as much as I could.
That meant digging out bank records. Vince could kill an elk with a bow and arrow. Tracking down receipts? Yeah, not so much. Good news, says Vince, was that Dora seemed most eager to help out.
She was sending me texts. Some of them made me feel like I am lucky that she's got my audit because she's going to help me. And then some of them made me feel like I think this girl wants something else.
I need a hug bad. Do you have one? You are my secret project. How does that feel? Exclamation point.
Vince's lawyer showed a document featuring friendly-sounding texts. Vince says they were sent by Dora.
I will be there if you text me your address. Oh boy, I got a small surprise. You want a massage? I can put you to sleep.
So, what about Vince's texts to her?
And where are your texts?
On a cell phone in my attorney's office.
There were very few texts from him, and whatever there were from him had been erased.
Oh, really? Sounds like a few of these texts were responses to something.
When she was texting me all this sexual stuff, I did not want to act like I wasn't interested as far as her auditing me.
So you never told her, I'd like you to stop with this sexual stuff?
I didn't.
A week or so after the audit began, Vince hadn't gotten the papers he needed together yet. He says Dora asked about stopping by to give him a hand. And then, well, we asked Vince to reenact what he claims took place.
And she just pushed me back, and I kind of went back and I landed like that, and she immediately came over, got on top of me, started kissing on me. Then she leaned up and started tearing my shirt off. She took me by the arm, she looked back a couple times and smiled at me, this seductive smile, I guess you could say.
The rest really should come with its own bow chicka wow soundtrack.
What happened when she brought you in here?
She put her foot up here like this, spun, flopped down the bed, and pulled me on top of her. And she was kissing me, and then she rolled over on top of me. We finished removing my clothes, removed her clothes, and things happened.
You think Dora Abrahamson might remember things differently? So did we. But she declined our offer to come on camera and give her side.
Do you have any regrets?
I regret not calling her boss, because she's taken something from me that I'll never get back.
What's that?
Self-respect.
Did we mention that Vince had a longtime girlfriend? Yeah, about that.
She's moved out. I don't know what's going to happen with the relationship. I love her so much, and I just hope she can understand.
A few days after their encounter, Vince says he got another call from Dora. She was stepping down from his audit. Conflict of interest, he says she explained. When the new IRS agent said Vince owed some $69,000, well...
Somebody has to be accountable for what the IRS does, because they are unaccountable. They run with no leash on.
So Vince took legal action, and even though at one point he says she'd texted him this sexy self-portrait, he now had more than Dora in his sights.
I'm suing Dora Abrahamson and the United States of America for sexual coercion and the violation of the Privacy Act.
It was the allegations about Dora that got all those headlines. In court papers, she denied them. David Moule has spoken to her briefly since that happened.
What can you tell us about what her state of mind was?
She felt that her name was being smeared. In some ways, she was sympathetic. She was crying.
In fact, he's considering dropping Dora from the suit. So if Vince wins, citizens could be footing the bill for the messy afterglow.
I imagine the taxpayers aren't going to be happy about paying any settlement.
What do you think would constitute justice in this case?
Justice would be served if the government would write out a check for $100,000.
You know, some people are going to be thinking, he got a free one. Not only did he get a free one, he now wants the government to pay for the free one that he got.
I guess they'd have to be in my shoes.
Dora is no longer with the IRS and has now been dropped from the lawsuit. The lawsuit itself has also been dismissed, although Vince Burrows continues to appeal the ruling after all this time. He's not giving up. We'll be right back.
Next. Oprah loves to give, but her ex-stepmother loves to get, and she's not keeping quiet unless she gets to keep her own mansion.
Just set me out now. Why shouldn't I just tell my story?
Coming up.
Oprah, Kobe Bryant, Sharon Osbourne, they're all rich and famous. And if you're thinking that must be nice, tonight here, the downside. The relatives who come out of the woodwork, the brothers, the uncles, the stepmothers, all wanting to turn their own family into personal ATMs. Chris Connolly tonight, following the money trail of the family Moochers.
In pop culture, freeloading friends make for comedy magic. Sweet. Such as Seinfeld's Kramer.
His whole life is a fantasy camp. Do nothing, fall ass backwards in the money, mooch food off your neighbors, and have sex without dating them.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but high-earning celebrities can get besieged in real life by gimme, gimme, gimme moochers, especially family. And they don't just ask for a fridge, they want the whole house. Just ask Oprah Winfrey.
When I was making $22,000 a year, people always needed $50.
Okay.
Then when I moved to like $50,000 a year, everybody always needed $500. Now nobody needs anything less than $50,000.
Who could forget this epic giveaway? But when it comes to an ex-stepmother, even the famously generous Oprah has her be your best self limits. Barbara Winfrey married Oprah's father, Vernon, and lived with him in this $1.4 million house that Oprah bought them. When they divorced, Oprah asked her to move out.
You're a billionaire. God has blessed you to be a billionaire, and this is what you do?
Oprah, according to a spokesperson, offered to split the proceeds from the sale of the house or to buy her a more modest home. Reportedly, what she asked in exchange was that Barbara Winfrey sign a confidentiality agreement. But for this ex-stepmom, talk isn't that cheap.
She knows I know the story. I know the story. And to set me out now, why shouldn't I just tell my story?
Here's a true story. Family can be more avid than anyone to raid the bank of a big name.
Why do you think relatives of the famous are so eager for their money?
It's tough because they're family. It's like you become royalty.
Fred Ehrlich expertly dices and slices the zeitgeist for the YouTube show Pop Trigger and has his own solution for the money-minded mooch-tastic.
Yeah, exactly. There should be a celebrity family union, and they should negotiate different rates. So in much the same way that, like, your agent gets 10%, maybe your mom gets a house. Your sister gets a car, your cousins get fancy sneakers, and that's it. And we cut them off after that.
He might agree. These days, Shia LaBeouf can be seen trysting the night away in Nymphomaniac for putting this "I am not famous" bag over his head. Cool, bro. Still, he was flush enough to loan an uncle a sack of cash, $800,000 worth. After the loan wasn't repaid, Shia came here to this courthouse to make his debtor say uncle. Author of Celebrity Inc., Joe Piazza knows all about stars and their money.
Uncle said that he has been giving Shia and his mother, who is a single mom, financial support for years, and that he never asked for repayment, so he didn't really expect that he had to repay the loan that Shia gave him.
I want to help you, I do, but I am not some alien ambassador. You know, I'm a normal kid with normal problems.
Reported $5 million salary for Transformers Revenge of the Fallen? No problem. An $800,000 relative misunderstanding? Big problem.
Shia did not expect that money to be a gift.
But for a celebrity, flinging an alleged family moocher off the money train can lead to some highly unflattering consequences. So Sharon Osbourne's declared about her brother.
All he does is earn money from selling lies and foul things about myself and my family. He sold 5 different stories on me to the British press.
Why? Because the pair had a falling out after their father's death, and she pulled the financial plug after years of supporting her brother, whom we were unable to reach for comment.
All I did was give him money. I employed him. I gave him whatever he wanted.
Amends would imply that there's something to be mended. What you did can never be fixed.
Fresh-faced and effortlessly glamorous, Gossip Girl Leighton Meester wanted to pay for her ill young brother's health care needs. Only, the actress claimed, the $7,500 a month she sent healed her mother's money cravings instead.